Our next speakers, Birgit Reiter from AVA. She will introduce you the highlights of the Start Location Austria. And then, to give you first-hand information, Anna Iarotska will share her experiences with you. Anna is founder and CEO of Robo Wunderkind.
A warm welcome also from my side. It's now my pleasure to talk about the Startup Location Austria. So what about the startup and tech scene in Austria? This is Bitpanda, headquartered in Vienna and on a good path towards really becoming the leading retail exchange for cryptocurrencies here in Europe. Or did you, for example, know that Vienna has also become known as chatbot hotspot? There's a lively community here comprised of companies as well as incubators, accelerators, all working on chatbots. Or just to bring another example, did you know that we have ABC, the Austrian Blockchain Center here in Vienna, where an interdisciplinary team of professors, companies, startups collaborate to develop use cases of blockchain technology further. When it comes to well-known Austrian startups, I would say that like with the economic structure of Austria, where we have a very strong B2B sector, often it's also the Austrian startups that focus on B2B business models and therefore are lesser known than other international startups. But a famous one, for example, is Rantastic. Started out 10 years ago as a university project by 4 guys from Upper Austria, and 10 years later was sold to Adidas for 220 million euros. So not quite a unicorn, but almost. Or probably not many people know when they use internet videos that they are in fact using technology developed in Austria by Bitmovin. In 2018, they secured a big additional investment round and are also on a good path towards becoming an international tech company. By now they're in the US, but still they do most of their R&D in Austria, in Carinthia, in the most southern province of Austria. Or perhaps also a fact that not known to many is that N26, one of the biggest challenger banks by now disrupting the financial service industry. In fact, they were formed by 2 Austrians who actually went to Berlin to collect a lot of venture capital. But since last year, they now also have a technology and R&D center here in Vienna and do also a good share of the further development here in Austria. And finally, also the European contender for Apple Pay or Alibaba Pay is based on technology made in Austria. Blue Code is one of the mobile payment solution providers that is actually on a good development path to also becoming a big tech company. We also have seen a number of international founders starting their startup here in Austria. And this slide here only gives a few examples. Tourrada perhaps becoming one of the better knowns, but there is also Tourrada actually in fact was founded by an Australian who came to Vienna and started the company. But there's also the example of Piano. Piano is originally from Slovakia, a paywall for media houses. They expanded to Austria, moved the headquarters to Vienna, sourced and got additional investment, among them the Austrian governmental-backed venture capital fund. And with this investment, they were able to actually take over their biggest competitor in the US market. And by now, they actually have the market-leading position for paywalls in their very specific niche. Just a few examples here. I think over the course of the last few years, we have seen a dynamically developing Austrian startup ecosystem. And these bubbles here that you see all stand for various ingredients that the ecosystem needs. And all these bubbles, all these ingredients have grown, in my opinion, in an equilibrium. And I think this is what's key for an ecosystem to work, to function, to be in balance. We have seen an increase, for example, in the number of incubators, also funded by the government. New incubators were installed. At the same time, we have also seen more angel investors coming on stream, as some of the Austrian startups like Runtastic that I mentioned earlier had a very successful exit, and they are now reinvesting their money. But it's not just the money that they are bringing to the table. They are actually, in fact, also bringing to the table their experience, their know-how, their connections to support additional startups. And at the same time, we have also seen that more venture capital has become available, as well as on the funding side, the public sector has made available new instruments, new grants to cover all stages on the journey from a startup to actually now also a scale-up. When I look at the business location and what it has got to offer from the perspective of a startup, what are the strengths that I would like to highlight? First and foremost, it's the market and the access to the clients. Austria itself, 8.8 million inhabitants, but a wealthy country. Consumers have enough income to spend. This is a market size that is good for getting the product market fit right, for actually launching the product and having first experiences and lessons. With those lessons learned, you then can roll out your product in a very efficient way in the larger DACH region, which actually is 100 million consumers. So startups, international startups, are using Austria for that. Second, talent base. In Austria, particularly here in the eastern part of Austria, the student mix is a very international one. More than 30% of students in Vienna come from abroad, bring to the table their language skills and their international background. And that is something that also the startups can use, because obviously they are right from the beginning born global. They need language skills, etc. Third, financing. Here, I think we have seen an inflow of venture capital funds setting up a base in Vienna, having an office to scout and look for interesting startups, especially technology-intensive startups, as well as a growing business angel scene that has also helped the financing. Fourth, funding. And here I mainly mean public government funding, instruments that come in various forms, in the form of grants, but also in the form of R&D funding, etc. Austria was once named by the Forbes magazine as the pre-seed funding capital of Europe, because especially in the pre-seed phase, there is lots of funding available. And last but not least, I think it's the support that makes a difference. It's the stakeholders of the Austrian startup ecosystem who work hand in hand to support also international startup founders when settling in Austria, and to help them get founded and help them grow here. Yeah, as I said, Austria is your test market, then for products to be rolled out in the larger DACH region market. One additional word about the venture capital scene here in Austria. Austria, Vienna is home to the largest fund, Speed Invest. Speed Invest has been voted the most active European venture capital fund. By now, Speed Invest is not just one fund, but actually has branched out into 6 vertical funds, ranging from fintech, this is Speed Invest F, all the way to a fund specializing in marketplaces, another one specializing on Industry 4.0 applications, and so forth. So I think to explain the financing scene, this would be too much now, but I'm happy to also discuss that later on and to provide here some guidance for you. When it comes to funding, during the research location, I think the Austrian funding system was already discussed in detail. What's important to know is there is funding available at the national level, the 2 leading agencies being the Austrian Research Promotion Agency, covering funding for R&D tasks. And then when it comes to implementation from prototype, market ready to actually growth, it's the Austria Wirtschaftsservice that's offering that. But what's also important is don't forget about the funding that's available at the regional level. Depending on where you locate your startup, it's the regional government that, with their economic development agencies, also offer a lot of goodies ranging from grants to support, advice, all the way, and offer that to the startups. Important to know is also that the Austrian government introduced a separate category for international startup founders who are coming from outside the European Union. There is the so-called residence and work permit for startup founders. Important is that here we mean technology-intensive startups with innovative business ideas. The founder needs to personally exert the controlling influence on the management of the newly set up company. And as further selection criteria, the startup needs to prove that somebody's already backing its business idea, that there's real market potential behind it. And that requirement can be proven by being able to show already 50,000 euros of funding or having been selected for an Austrian incubation program. What would be my advice to international startups? The best way to come into Austria is to use one of the international incoming programs to taste the Startup Location Austria. Here on this slide, I want to give a brief overview of the variety of programs that are out there. The best known one perhaps is the Vienna Startup Package. Twice a year, 20 international startups get selected, and then they have a paid stay here in Vienna, where they can actually get to know the location, network, make contacts, test the market potential, and so forth. But there is also, for example, for Asian startups in particular, there's the Jingo Austria program. Again, twice a year, 10 Asian startups get selected for it. And then, of course, for example, the largest CEE accelerator is also located in Vienna, V-Accelerate. This accelerator is a multi-corporate, non-sector specific acceleration program. 15 Austrian corporates are cooperating and jointly selecting interesting international startups. Again, the startups get to stay here for a certain period, and they are certain that they will have a first use case with one of the corporate partners. The others listed here are actually partly sector-specific programs for tourism, for air and space industry, etc., etc. So I think also not just in Vienna, but also Graz, Linz, Salzburg, other locations offer interesting programs here. But Having said all this, I think much more important, Anna, is let's ask a practitioner. Anna is the CEO and co-founder of Robo Wunderkind, an edutech startup, a smart toy. The claim is kids can learn how to code while playing and having fun. And tell us more about your company and your journey thus far. How did it come that you set up in Austria?
Thank you. My pleasure to be here. So Robo Wunderkind is a programmable robot for children aged 5 to 12. And we started the company in 2015. Actually, all founders met in Vienna, so it was very naturally for us to found the company here as well, and we all came here as exchange students, so we were studying here. And to be honest, actually, like at the very beginning of our startup life, we took part in an accelerator which was in China and in San Francisco. So we did have a choice. And we spent 3 months in China working on our robot development, on the R&D process, and we spent also like a month and a half in San Francisco. So we got a taste of different locations. And I think like the reasons why we stayed in Austria were, on one hand, it's actually like very, very affordable living here, like because we had to compare with San Francisco, and like we definitely like we were looking at our budget and what we can afford, what kind of team we can afford. So this was really like a very important reason for us. And then second, access to talent. And here again, like comparing, for example, to the US, in the US, like there is also like the competition is much higher because we would be competing for talent with huge corporations. So in Austria, like we had this very educated workforce, which is comparably like more likely to be motivated to work for a startup. So it was definitely like our second reason. And the third reason was actually like the possibilities for funding, because as Birgit mentioned, the early stage funding in Austria is really, really, I mean, like, I think it's very unique actually. Like there are some probably other locations in Europe that have the same, but in Austria there is a number of programs for high-tech R&D projects. And we definitely like we benefited a lot, and it was like our third reason to actually found the company here.
And for our audience who doesn't know, you originally are from Ukraine, and the
Yes.
original founder is from Kazakhstan.
Exactly. So like we were 3 founders. So the Rustam is from Kazakhstan, Yuri from Russia, and myself I'm from Ukraine. So we like
All met here.
Exactly.
All right. So when it came to the actual company formation, which services or support did you use?
So we spoke with a team of Chamber of Commerce, which is Kama, Austria, knew you also from the very early in the days because we were also in touch with ABBA, and they supported us and actually made connections which helped us with some bureaucratic steps at the very beginning. And we also took part at INITS Accelerator, which is a local Vienna-based accelerator. So like this is the 3 basically Chamber of Commerce, ABBA, and INITS for the start.
INITS is the leading Vienna city-owned incubation program that has a very good reputation of turning out technology-intensive startups, and I think was also voted one of the best incubation programs European-wide for sure. When it comes to grants and financial subsidies, have you been able to get anything here also?
Yeah, definitely. So we actually received a number of grants from a local funding agency, and from AWS. At the moment, we are applying for funding at European level. So like it is, if your startup idea has a technology part and like has an R&D part, there is like a very high chance to get funding here.
Do you have any specific tips for the international founders who are listening in now?
I think it's really crucial to come to Vienna and to connect in order to get the feeling yourself. And I think that Vienna is very convincing, not just for founders, but also for the teams. Like it's like the most livable city in the world. And it is a huge actually argument to convince people to move, to relocate to Vienna and to work for your startup. So the combination of an amazing city, livable, very affordable cost of living, and startup possibility to work in a startup like was very helpful for us to recruit talent.
And in this stage that you're in right now, in the growth stage, what are the aspects of the business location there that you could perhaps, that are worthwhile mentioning?
Yeah, so like for us, actually, like we have partners and we've been selling already in more than 20 countries, but Germany, DACH region, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland are our number one. So I think it's definitely also very helpful to be close to the market with a huge purchasing capacity, like that speaks the same language. So comparing, like if we look at the US, like we're 300 million speaking the same language. So the biggest market speaking the same language in Europe is DACH region, and so here it's also very helpful.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience.
My pleasure.